Every morning, millions of people over 60 do something that quietly works against their own hearts. Not because they are careless, not because they ignored their doctor, but because nobody ever told them that the hours between waking up and mid-morning are the most dangerous window in the entire cardiovascular day, and that several completely ordinary things most people do during those hours make it significantly worse. I am Dr. Sandra Holt, and if you take blood pressure medication, if you have been told your numbers run high, or if you have a family history of heart attack or stroke, I need you to stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand 11 morning mistakes that people over 60 make every single day, what each one does inside the body, and what to do instead. These are not obscure warnings from a research paper. These are the explanations that should have been given in the office the day the first prescription was written. For most patients, they never were. And before I say anything else, let me be clear about something. When I say mistake, I do not mean something foolish or negligent. I mean a habit that made complete sense before you understood the cardiovascular biology of the morning hours. Once you understand it, the habit becomes impossible to continue without knowing exactly what it costs you. So let us start with the foundation. Let us talk about why mornings are different, and then let us count down from 11 to 1, ending with the mistake that carries the highest risk of all. Between approximately 6 in the morning and noon, the human body undergoes a predictable and dramatic cardiovascular shift. Cortisol, the stress hormone, surges to its highest level of the day. Blood pressure rises sharply. Heart rate increases. The blood itself becomes more prone to clotting as platelets become stickier. This window is not a coincidence. It is the reason most heart attacks occur between 6 and noon. It is the reason most strokes cluster in the early morning hours. It is the reason cardiologists refer to this period by a specific name, the morning surge. For a person under 40 with healthy vessels, a flexible nervous system, and responsive kidney function, the morning surge is manageable. The body adapts. For a person over 60, especially one with existing hypertension, stiffened arteries, reduced kidney filtering capacity, or any combination of these, the morning surge hits a system that is already under strain. Every mistake made during those first hours amplifies a problem that the body is already struggling to contain. That is the context. Now let us look at the 11 mistakes. The first mistake happens before most people are fully awake. It happens in the bedroom, in the dark, in the first 10 seconds after the alarm goes off. And it is this: standing up too fast. Donald was 67, a retired postal worker who prided himself on efficiency. He woke up, sat up, stood up, and was in the bathroom within 15 seconds every morning. He had done it this way for decades. Then his doctor added a second blood pressure medication after his readings stayed elevated despite the first. Within a week, Donald was grabbing the doorframe every morning to steady himself. He thought the medication was too strong. He thought something was wrong with the new prescription. What was actually happening had a name: orthostatic hypotension. When you lie flat, your cardiovascular system distributes blood evenly. When you stand, gravity immediately pulls blood downward toward the legs. In a healthy younger body, the nervous system compensates within a second or two by constricting the blood vessels and slightly increasing heart rate to push blood back up to the brain. In a body over 60, especially one on blood pressure medication, this compensation is slower. The vessels are stiffer. The autonomic nervous system responds less crisply. Blood pressure medication reduces the available pressure reserve even further. The result is a brief but significant drop in blood pressure at the exact moment you stand. In some people, this causes dizziness. In some people, it causes momentary confusion. In some people, it causes nothing they consciously register. But it still stresses the cardiovascular system, and in a body already navigating the morning surge, it adds a dangerous spike and drop pattern that over time takes a cumulative toll. The solution costs nothing and takes 30 seconds. Before you stand, sit on the edge of the bed. Let your legs hang. Wait. Let the circulatory system have the time it is asking for. Then stand slowly. This single change reduces the morning orthostatic drop measurably and removes a daily insult to a cardiovascular system that is already working hard. The second mistake is one that feels productive, responsible, and virtuous. It is exercising intensely first thing in the morning without any warm-up, hydration, or medication on board. Carol was 69, motivated and health conscious. She had read that morning exercise was beneficial for heart health and blood pressure control, which is true. She took that information and turned it into a 7-day-a-week brisk 40-minute walk that she started within 15 minutes of waking, before breakfast, before her blood pressure medication, before a single glass of water. Her readings actually worsened over the following 2 months, and she could not understand why. What Carol had created, without realizing it, was a perfect storm of cardiovascular stress layered directly on top of the morning surge. Exercise raises blood pressure. The morning surge raises blood pressure. Dehydration from overnight fluid loss raises blood pressure. Her medication had not yet been absorbed, so its protective effect was absent. All 3 factors hit simultaneously every morning for 8 weeks. Morning exercise is genuinely beneficial for blood pressure control. The research is consistent and compelling, but the timing and sequencing matter. Take your blood pressure medication first and allow at least 30 minutes for absorption to begin. Drink 12 to 16 ounces of water before going out. Begin with a 10-minute gentle warm-up before increasing pace. For most patients over 60 on antihypertensive medications, this sequencing converts morning exercise from a cardiovascular stressor into the cardiovascular benefit it is meant to be. Mistake number 9 involves something in nearly every kitchen in the country. It sits on the counter, costs very little, and is considered a morning essential by the majority of people over 60. It is coffee. More specifically, it is the combination of coffee and a blood pressure medication taken at the same time. George was 72, a man who had taken his lisinopril every morning for 4 years. He swallowed it with his first sip of coffee because that was the routine that worked. He never missed a dose. His doctor was pleased with his consistency. His blood pressure, however, remained stubbornly elevated in the morning readings, despite what looked like perfect adherence. Here is what the label on the lisinopril bottle does not say. Caffeine is a vasoconstrictor. It narrows blood vessels and raises blood pressure through a pathway that partially competes with what ACE inhibitors like lisinopril and ARBs, like losartan, are working to achieve. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that caffeine consumption can blunt the blood pressure lowering effect of antihypertensive medications for up to 3 hours after ingestion. In a patient who takes medication at 7 in the morning and drinks coffee at the same time, the peak protective window of the drug and the peak pressor effect of the caffeine overlap almost exactly. This does not mean eliminating coffee. It means separating the timing. Take medication first, with water. Wait 30 to 45 minutes before the first cup. This simple shift allows the medication to begin its absorptive phase before caffeine introduces competing vascular resistance. For patients whose morning readings remain elevated, despite good overall control through the day, this timing adjustment alone sometimes produces the improvement that no dose increase had achieved. Mistake number 8 is one of the most widespread and least discussed cardiovascular errors made by people over 60. It happens in the bathroom. It happens quietly, privately, and with considerable physical effort. It is straining during a bowel movement. This sounds mundane. It is not. The Valsalva maneuver, the physiological process that occurs when you hold your breath and bear down, creates a dramatic and sudden increase in intrathoracic pressure. Blood pressure spikes sharply. Heart rate changes abruptly. For a person with normal cardiovascular function, this is managed without incident. For a person over 60 with hypertension, arterial stiffness, or existing coronary artery disease, this spike occurs in the same morning window when the body is already at its highest cardiovascular stress point of the day. Lena was 74, a woman who had been constipated for years without ever connecting it to her blood pressure management. She took her amlodipine faithfully. She limited salt. She exercised. Her morning readings were consistently her worst readings of the day, and she and her doctor had attributed this entirely to white coat anxiety and the morning surge phenomenon. Nobody had ever asked her about her bowel habits. The practical correction here involves two components. First, fiber intake. Adults over 60 typically consume far less fiber than their digestive systems require. Metamucil, which contains psyllium husk and is available at any pharmacy, taken as 1 rounded teaspoon in 8 ounces of water once daily, consistently reduces straining and normalizes transit time within 1 to 2 weeks. Benefiber, which contains wheat dextrin and dissolves completely in liquid without texture, is a second option for those who find psyllium unpalatable. Second, hydration. Dehydration is the single most common cause of constipation in older adults, and many people over 60 are chronically underhydrated because the thirst mechanism becomes less reliable with age. 16 ounces of water upon waking, before anything else, addresses both the hydration deficit from overnight and the constipation risk simultaneously. Mistake number 7 is the one that surprises patients the most when they first hear it. It involves checking blood pressure at the wrong time, in the wrong way, and then making medical decisions based on numbers that do not reflect reality. Helen was 68 and meticulous. She owned a Withings BPM Connect, one of the most accurate home monitors available, and she checked her blood pressure every morning. She checked it right after getting up. She checked it after her coffee. She checked it after the news, which on many mornings was not calming. She kept a notebook. She brought the notebook to every appointment. Her doctor adjusted her medication 3 times in 18 months, based primarily on her morning readings. What Helen was measuring was not her actual baseline blood pressure. She was measuring the morning surge, the post-caffeine elevation, and in some readings, the acute stress response to news content that registered in her cardiovascular system before her conscious mind had fully processed it. Each of these is real. None of them represents the stable blood pressure her medication is managing through the day. The American Heart Association guidelines for home blood pressure monitoring specify a protocol that most patients are never taught. Sit quietly for 5 minutes before measuring. Do not take a reading within 30 minutes of caffeine, exercise, or a meal. Take 2 readings 1 minute apart and record the average. Measure at the same time each day, ideally in the late morning after medication has reached peak effect, rather than at the most cardiovascular volatile point of the day. A Withings BPM Connect, available at Best Buy and on Amazon for around $80, will store and trend readings automatically. The Omron Platinum BP5450 is equally validated and widely available at Walgreens. The device is only as useful as the protocol it is used within. Mistake number 6 involves a glass of grapefruit juice, or sometimes an entire grapefruit. And the patients who make this mistake are often the most health-conscious people in the room. Martin was 71, recently retired, committed to clean eating. Every morning, he drank a glass of fresh squeezed grapefruit juice as part of a breakfast he was proud of. He had been doing this for 30 years. When his cardiologist started him on amlodipine, a calcium channel blocker in the same family as felodipine and nifedipine, nobody mentioned grapefruit. Why would they? It is fruit. Within 3 weeks, Martin began experiencing significant ankle swelling, flushing, and an uncomfortable awareness of his heartbeat that was not there before. His doctor increased his diuretic to manage what looked like fluid retention from the amlodipine. The real cause was still in his kitchen. Grapefruit and grapefruit juice contain compounds called furanocoumarins, specifically bergamottin and dihydroxybergamottin, which inhibit a liver enzyme called CYP3A4. This enzyme is responsible for metabolizing a significant number of cardiovascular medications, including amlodipine, felodipine, nifedipine, certain statins including atorvastatin sold as Lipitor by Pfizer, and some immunosuppressants. When this enzyme is blocked, the medication is not broken down at its normal rate. Blood blood levels of the drug climb higher than intended. The clinical effect is intensified beyond what the prescribed dose was designed to produce. For amlodipine specifically, grapefruit interaction can increase drug exposure by 20 to 40%. The swelling Martin experienced was amlodipine doing more than it was supposed to do because his liver could not process it normally. The solution is not a supplement or a timing adjustment. It is removing grapefruit and grapefruit juice entirely from the diet if you take any of the affected medications. Oranges, lemons, and limes do not carry the same risk. Grapefruit, pomelos, and Seville oranges do. Mistake number 5 is one of the most emotionally loaded entries on this list because it involves a conversation about salt that most patients have already had and believe they are already following correctly. They are often not. Patricia was 66, obedient about her sodium restriction. She had stopped salting her food entirely. She used Mrs. Dash salt-free seasoning blend, available at most grocery stores, on everything. She avoided fast food. She read labels. Her morning blood pressure was still not where her doctor wanted it. And then a nutritionist reviewed her actual diet for the first time. Patricia had eliminated the salt shaker but had not addressed the hidden sodium in her morning routine. A single serving of Quaker instant oatmeal in the original flavor contains 75 to 105 milligrams of sodium. Thomas English muffins contain 200 milligrams per muffin. A tablespoon of soy sauce contains over 900 milligrams. 2 slices of standard whole wheat bread, the kind marketed as heart healthy, contain 200 to 280 milligrams combined. A morning that begins with English muffins, a small amount of soy sauce on eggs, and instant oatmeal can deliver close to 600 milligrams of sodium before 10 in the morning, without a single visible grain of salt having been added to anything. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day for adults with hypertension and no more than 2,300 milligrams for the general adult population. The hidden reality is that the salt shaker contributes only about 11% of total sodium intake in the average American diet. 70% comes from processed and packaged foods. A patient who eliminates added salt but continues eating processed foods is addressing 11% of the problem, while 90% continues unchallenged. The practical approach is label reading at the brand level. Bob Evans' original mashed potatoes contain 470 milligrams per half cup. Campbell's tomato soup contains 480 milligrams per serving. Pepperidge Farm whole grain bread contains 140 milligrams per slice. Knowing these numbers by brand and switching to genuinely low-sodium alternatives, such as Dave's Killer Bread, thin-sliced at 75 milligrams per slice, or Bob's Red Mill steel-cut oats with 0 added sodium, changes the morning sodium load significantly without requiring the elimination of any food category. Mistake number 4 involves an interaction that happens in tens of millions of bathrooms every morning and that almost nobody recognizes as a cardiovascular risk. It is the combination of a blood pressure medication and a common over-the-counter pain reliever taken first thing in the morning for arthritis, back pain, or a headache that was already there upon waking. Walter was 70, reliable about his medication schedule. He took his valsartan every morning at 7 and a dose of ibuprofen, the generic available at any pharmacy, at the same time because his knees ached when he first got up and the ibuprofen helped him start moving. He had been doing this for 2 years. His nephrologist, reviewing labs at a routine appointment, found early signs of declining kidney function that his cardiologist had not yet noticed. NSAIDs, the class of pain relievers that includes ibuprofen sold as Advil by Haleon and naproxen sold as Aleve by Bayer, work by blocking prostaglandins. Prostaglandins do several things in the body, but one of their critical functions is maintaining blood flow to the kidneys and helping the kidneys regulate fluid and sodium balance. When prostaglandins are blocked by NSAIDs, the kidneys retain more sodium and water, which raises blood volume, which raises blood pressure. In a patient already taking a medication designed to lower blood pressure, the NSAID partially reverses the medication's effect at the organ level. The kidney pays a double price: reduced protective blood flow and the strain of managing elevated pressure simultaneously. This is not a theoretical risk. The FDA added a cardiovascular warning to all NSAID labels in 2015. The combination of an ARB like valsartan or losartan with regular NSAID use is one of the most reliably documented causes of medication-related blood pressure elevation and early kidney damage in older adults. The morning timing makes it worse because both substances are hitting the kidney in its most vulnerable window of the day. Acetaminophen, sold as Tylenol by Kenvue, does not carry the same renal and vascular risk for most patients and is a reasonable alternative for joint pain management in people on blood pressure medication. The caveat is liver function, which should be discussed with a physician in patients who also take other medications processed by the liver. But as a morning pain management choice for someone on antihypertensives, acetaminophen is categorically safer than ibuprofen or naproxen as a routine daily habit. Mistake number 3 is the one most patients find the most difficult to hear because it involves a part of the morning they consider sacred, necessary, and non-negotiable. It is the first cigarette of the day. For those who do not smoke, the rolling sacrifor such as that wine such belongs here because the mechanism it illustrates applies to several other morning habits, including certain decongestants, some energy supplements, and even specific herbal products. But the cigarette is the most powerful and most direct example. Robert was 63, a man who had smoked for 40 years and had reduced from a pack a day to 3 or 4 cigarettes. He was proud of the reduction. He took his metoprolol every morning and considered himself largely compliant with his cardiac care. His cardiologist had told him to quit entirely. He had not, but he had cut back significantly, and he felt that counted for something. Here is what happens in the body within 1 minute of the first cigarette. Nicotine triggers a rapid release of adrenaline. Adrenaline constricts blood vessels. Blood pressure rises immediately, sometimes by 10 to 20 millimeters of mercury within minutes. Heart rate increases. Coronary arteries, the vessels that supply the heart itself, narrow at the exact moment the blood is demanding more oxygen. Carbon monoxide from combustion binds to hemoglobin and reduces the blood's oxygen-carrying capacity. In a body already in the morning cardiovascular surge, with elevated cortisol, rising blood pressure, and stickier platelets, the first cigarette of the day layers a pharmacological assault on a system that was already at its daily peak of vulnerability. Metoprolol and other beta blockers partially counteract the adrenaline effect of nicotine, which creates a deceptive sense of protection. The patient feels less of the heart pounding that used to accompany smoking. They assume this means the medication is managing the risk. What it actually means is that one effect of nicotine is being masked, while the vascular constriction, the carbon monoxide binding, and the coronary narrowing continue unmodified. Nicotine replacement therapy, including the Nicoderm CQ patch available at CVS and Walgreens, delivers nicotine without combustion and without the carbon monoxide load. It is not a perfect solution, and it does not eliminate nicotine's vascular effects entirely. But in a patient who has not yet been able to quit entirely, transitioning the morning nicotine delivery from combustion to a patch or Nicorette gum removes the carbon monoxide component and reduces the acute adrenaline spike substantially. It is a harm reduction step worth the conversation. Mistake number 2 is the one most people discover only after it has already cost them. It is taking blood pressure medication inconsistently, skipping it on mornings that feel rushed, doubling up the next day to compensate, or gradually shifting the timing later and later until the morning window of protection is no longer covered. Irene was 75, organized and intelligent, a former teacher who kept meticulous records of everything except, it turned out, her actual medication timing. She took her amlodipine in the morning, but morning meant somewhere between 7 and 11. depending on what the day held. On busy mornings, she sometimes forgot until noon. On weekends, she took it after her late breakfast at 10:30. She occasionally missed entirely and took two the following morning. What Irene was creating was a daily variation in drug blood levels that her cardiovascular system was responding to as instability. Amlodipine has a long half-life of 30 to 50 hours, which means it stays in the body for a relatively long time, and single missed doses have less immediate impact than with short-acting medications. But the cumulative effect of variable timing is variable trough levels, which are the lowest blood drug levels that occur just before the next dose. When troughs are inconsistent, the blood pressure protection they are supposed to maintain becomes inconsistent. The morning surge hits on some days with full coverage and on other days with a depleted safety margin. Consistency of timing matters more than perfect timing. 11 in the morning every single day is medically superior to 7 on weekdays and 11 on weekends and forgetting on Tuesdays. The body adapts to a stable pharmacological environment. It does not adapt well to a pharmacological environment that changes daily based on schedule and memory. For patients who struggle with consistency, a medication management app such as MediSafe, available free on both iPhone and Android, sends reminders at a fixed time and tracks missed doses with enough granularity to show a physician exactly what the pattern has been. A weekly pill organizer, standard at any pharmacy, removes the uncertainty of whether today's dose was taken. And for patients on multiple medications with complex schedules, a blister pack service offered through pharmacies such as PillPack, now operated through Amazon Pharmacy, pre-sorts medications by date and time in sealed packs, removing the daily decision entirely. And that brings us to the mistake that carries the highest risk, the one that sits underneath all the others, the one that makes every other morning error more dangerous than it would otherwise be. It is this: not knowing what your blood pressure actually is on a consistent daily basis, and therefore having no way to recognize when something has shifted until the shift has already caused harm. Eugene was 78, a man who trusted his doctor completely and had his blood pressure checked at every appointment, every 3 months. Between appointments, he measured nothing. He felt fine. His medication had been unchanged for 2 years. He considered his blood pressure managed. Over a 12-week period between appointments, Eugene's kidney function had declined enough to reduce the clearance of his lisinopril, raising drug levels and causing his blood pressure to drop lower than his already aging cardiovascular system could safely tolerate. He had episodes of lightheadedness that he attributed to standing too fast. He had a morning where he felt briefly confused that he did not mention to anyone. His next appointment blood pressure reading was actually within normal range because it was measured under calm clinic conditions at 2 in the afternoon, 12 hours removed from the pattern of silent morning instability that had been occurring for weeks. Home blood pressure monitoring is not a luxury or an overreaction. For a patient over 60 with hypertension on any antihypertensive medication, it is the only way to know what is actually happening in the hours that carry the highest cardiovascular risk. A reading taken by a nurse at 2 in the afternoon every 3 months is clinically useful. It is not a substitute for knowing what your pressure does at 7 in the morning on Tuesday, 6 days after a new medication was added, during a week when you had a stomach virus and were not keeping fluids down normally. The Omron Platinum BP5450 Upper Arm Blood Pressure Monitor, available at Walgreens and on Amazon for approximately $65, stores 60 readings per user with date and timestamps and connects via Bluetooth to the Omron Connect app, which generates trend reports a physician can review at a glance. The Withings BPM Connect, available at Best Buy for approximately $80, uploads readings automatically to the HealthMate app and can share data directly with healthcare providers. Either device, used correctly and consistently according to the AHA 5-minute rest protocol, gives you and your doctor a picture of your cardiovascular reality that a quarterly clinic visit cannot provide. Because the ultimate truth about morning blood pressure mistakes is not about coffee timing or grapefruit or fiber supplements although all of those matter. The ultimate truth is that your blood pressure is doing something specific in your body every morning in the window that carries the highest cardiac and stroke risk of the entire day. And you either know what it is doing consistently with real data so that you and your doctor can respond intelligently, or you do not. And if you do not, every other mistake on this list is invisible to the people responsible for protecting you.